So welcome everyone to our second People First talk. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Radha Ruparal. I'm with Teach for All, and I get to kick off our talk today and introduce our lovely speakers. Before I do that, just for anyone who is new to this space or the community, the People First Talks is a new initiative we have as part of the People First community. And the People First community was formed with this idea that if we want to invest in sustainable development, we have to prioritize investments in leadership development, particularly leadership that is collective, that brings many diverse voices together, including local leadership. And so this series of talks is a chance for us to explore with one another, what does that leadership look like and how do we cultivate it? So last time, for those of you who joined our very first talk, we had Fred Swanaker from the African Leadership Group, and it was a wonderful talk. I think one of the things I took away from him was this idea that leadership is scalable. So if we lift up one leader, that can lift up so many more. And so I'm excited to have today with us Vishal and Pavitra, who are also going to talk about the power of one leadership, particularly investing in young leaders who can lift up many more. So with that, let me introduce you to our speakers today. So first we have Vishal Talreja. Vishal, maybe give us a bit of a wave. Vishal is one of the 11 co-founders of Dream a Dream. And he'll get to share a lot more about it, but Dream a Dream is an initiative that's been working for over 20 years. And what it's been doing is working to grow life skills for young people to help them overcome adversity. And they've reached over 1 million people in India over the past 20 years. So Vishal will share a lot more about his journey, what he's learned about growing and developing leadership along the way. And to be with him in that conversation, we have another incredible leader, Pavitra. Pavitra, where are you? Just give us a wave there. Perfect. Pavitra actually participated as a young adolescent girl in the Dream a Dream Life Skills program. And she was so inspired by that and the opportunities that created for her that she came on and joined the staff of Dream a Dream, first as an intern, and now she's the associate director for the innovation lab, where she now has the opportunity to develop life skills for thousands of young people across India. So I'm really, really excited to have these two in conversation, and I don't want to take up any more space. So I'm going to turn it over to them in just a second. But before I do that, a couple quick notes. One, the session is being recorded for those who can't be with us. And second, how this conversation will go is, I'm going to invite Vishal and Pavitra to be in dialogue for the next 20 or 25 minutes or so, just exploring these themes around what's the type of leadership that we need and what have they learned along the way around how to grow it. And then after that, we're going to have a good 20, 25 minutes for questions from the group. So in the chat, if you have a question, start putting it in during the conversation, because I'd like to get to as many of those as possible. With that, let me turn it over to you, Pavitra, to get us started in the conversation.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you so much for that introduction. So before I start my conversation with Vishal, I think this is the first ever dialogue that I'm having it with Vishal. It's not easy because being a beneficiary, I consider this opportunity, I feel so privileged for just having me today. So thank you so much for giving this opportunity or thinking of, facilitating dialogue in this format. So with that, I look forward to sharing my own journey and the work that we have done with young people in Bangalore. So to get started, I would like to invite Vishal to tell us, about your personal journey and how did you come to this work of co-founding Dream a Dream to develop leadership in young people who come from difficult background.
Thank you, Pavitra. It's actually my honor to be in dialogue with you, and also very honored to the People First community for inviting me to share a bit of my own journey. As Radha mentioned, Dream a Dream started about 22 years back Um, I was 21 years old when the idea of Dream a Dream emerged. Uh, I had just finished university, and I was looking to work with an investment bank uh, and build my career when I got an opportunity to go to Finland on an exchange program, on a student exchange program. I was the first kid in the family to ever travel abroad, so I took up the opportunity, went to Finland. And there were two, three things that struck me when I was in Finland. One was the difference in education between India and Finland. In India, my own upbringing had been a very linear approach. Go to school, do well in your school, get top grades, get top ranks, go to university, get top ranks, do a master's program, get a top rank, get a job, get married, have kids, have a house. That's how my life trajectory had been designed. And then I met students in Finland who were taking a break from education, traveling to various countries, setting up their own projects, working in a variety of different things, following their purpose and passions. And that made me question about why am I following a linear path? The second was that I met people who took a lot of pride in who they were and the work they did. I made friends with a bartender who was also studying at the university. I made friends with a person who was the secretary guard at a five-star hotel who was also doing a diploma at the university. I got invited to their home for a meal. And when I went to their home, it was a beautiful home, as wonderful as a home of a person working at a software company. And both of them took tremendous pride in who they were, their own journeys, their identities, and the work that they chose to do, which was very unlike what I had seen in India. One, you would never find me in the house of the security guard having a meal with them because of the caste system that we grew up in India. Second, I don't think I could ever come across a security guard who says, I grew up and chose to be a security guard and I take pride in being a security guard. And this was way back in 1999. Of course, things have changed considerably in the last 20 years. So that idea struck me, and it made me rethink about my own upbringing. And I realized that even though I grew up in a relatively poor family, poor neighborhood, in that neighborhood, there were families who were poorer than us. And my parents used to tell me, don't play with kids from those households because they might spoil you. So I grew up with certain notions of class and caste and accepted them to be the way society is. And when I was in Finland, in a completely different construct, in a completely different cultural environment, those notions got challenged. And the beauty of being 21 is that you can think anything. So, I used to keep a diary and I said, I want to go back to India and change the way we look at dignity for a human being. That why can't every human being, irrespective of their background, be treated with care, respect, and dignity? And even kind of made a commitment to myself that if I don't do anything about it when I go back to India, I will move to Finland. So I came back, started talking to a bunch of friends, people I know, and there were others who had similar ideas that were brewing in their heads, and we started Dream a Dream within 2 months. This was November 1999. And I still wanted to build my career, so I continued working with an investment bank while Dream a Dream was taking its first few baby steps as a voluntary setup. So we were a voluntary run organization, and the first few groups that we started working with were HIV positive children and cancer affected children. And I remember going and engaging in a care home for HIV positive children and realizing very quickly that they had people coming in to visit them. They had people coming in and offering donations, toys, books, food. But people would not interact with the children. They would not engage with the children because there was stigma attached with it. When we wanted to run a workshop, an art workshop for the children in a public space, when the organizers found out that we were using a public space, they refused to give us the venue because they were scared that the children might contaminate the place. That's when we realized that it was not just about creating fun, engaging, joyful experience for children, but there were deeper mindsets and prejudices and biases in society that were preventing children and young people to live a life of dignity. So we had to quickly learn that and move into what are the capacities and life skills that we can build in young people so they can overcome these adversities and learn to engage with society and its mindsets and try to shift them. So those were the initial years. And I remember this one particular incident when we were running a camp for children. And there was this one girl who was 10 or 11 years old. And she participated in all the activities in the camp. She did climbing, rock climbing, hiking, building a boat, doing art activities, but she wouldn't speak a word. Through those 4 days of the camp, she wouldn't speak a word. We tried to coax her, encourage her, sit with her. She wouldn't. So we let her be. On the last day of the camp, as we were walking back from the campsite to the bus stop, which is a 1-hour walk through the forest, out of the blue, she came and held my hand. And she walked with me in silence, holding my hand. We got to the bus stop. We got into the bus. She sat next to me, holding my hand. We got to the last stop where she had to go her way and I had to go my way. And that was the moment. After 4 days of being together, she started bawling. She started crying uncontrollably and saying that, I don't want to go back to my home. Take me with you. And of course, I couldn't take her with me and we parted ways. But it took me a few years after that to realize that what that young girl had experienced in those 4 days was acceptance, care, respect, and dignity. And it also took her 4 days to build trust in another human being, with another adult in her life. And when she did realize that what she had experienced was this deep sense of care and respect, is when she wanted to deeply engage with the relationship. So even it took me a few years to realize that the core of our work was about building these healthy relationships, which are grounded in values of dignity, care, and respect. So that was really the genesis of Dream a Dream. Over to you, Pavitra.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. I think that's the power of the caring and compassionate adult who plays role in young people to be able to realize who they are and to own themselves. So Vishal, just building on what you shared, as you continue to, build Dream a Dream, and you've been on this journey. So what are other lessons or insights you have learned about what kind of leadership is needed?
Yes. Oh, well, there are so many lessons, especially along leadership. One of the earliest lessons was as the organization grew, and we were 7-8 years into the organization. And remember, Pavitra, when you came into the organization, we were beginning to see the first batch of young people graduating out from the organization. And what was amazing was that the first batch of young people graduating out with the life skills that they needed and with this sense of now identity, respect to go on and take on the world, follow their purpose and build their careers, they were coming back and saying that I want to contribute back. I just don't want to have a life where I have financial security and I have a career and I have a family that I take care of. I want all of that, but most importantly, I want a life of meaning and purpose, and I want to come back and contribute back so other young people like me don't have the experiences that I had, which is not something that we had planned for. Right? Our focus was to build capacities and life skills and let you out into the world to go find your own path. But that gave us an idea that there's more to this than just a few young people coming back. So that's when we started bringing in our alumni into the work. Pavitra, you joined us then, and we had a few others who started joining us then. And very quickly, when we had young people come back, alumni come back as facilitators into the program, we realized it changed the conversation in the organization. It changed the conversation, one, from certain narratives of beneficiaries, treating young people as beneficiaries, to treating young people as partners in the journey, to we offering interventions and programs to young people, to we creating opportunities for young people to thrive. So the relationship also shifted from a power equation of a giver and a receiver to that of that we're learning from each other, and in the process we are transforming each other. I remember very early on, we used to run a rugby program, and after running it for a few years, we decided to close it down because we were not able to find coaches, funding, we were not able to find grounds to play at. And we had one of our alumni who was a facilitator for the program, who had seen the impact of the program on the young people in the community. So he managed to get the young people together, put together a video about why the program should continue, came back to office, called us all into a room on a weekday, and made us see that video and see the power that the program had had on the young people and how it had transformed young people's lives, not just on the rugby field, but even in school and in the neighborhood. And convinced us that it was a program worth continuing. We continued the program for a few more years and phased it out. Now, what happened to that program? The young people who were in the program who went on to become adults very soon realized that they had the agency to use rugby to transform their neighborhood. So they started running a community rugby club where near a garbage bin or a garbage dump, they started training and teaching other kids in their neighborhood on rugby and using rugby to help them develop life skills. And these kids went on to play rugby at the state level, at the national level, started becoming coaches, training mainstream kids in the play of rugby. Today, there's a third generation of rugby players that has emerged, including a bunch of girls who have formed a rugby team, and quite a few of them who are now today, as we speak, in an India selection camp. And these girls then managed to also get admissions into college based on a sports scholarship. And some of them even went on to convince certain colleges that they should include rugby in their sports scholarship program. That level of generational impact of leadership developing new leadership developing new leadership is what we would have never thought about. We would have never planned. So that was first lesson one, that bringing in young people from the community into the organization as young leaders has generational impact in the way we think as an organization, and second, in the way that the young people create impact in their own communities beyond the organization. We'll probably pause here, Pavitra, if you had a follow-up question.
I don't have follow-up question, but yeah, this is where I would like to share my own experience in the program. One, I think building, leadership in young people who come from difficult background is not easy because there's so much that, for me personally, speaking, it was very difficult because one, it's traumatic childhood. There's, already, a lot of baggage that we carry. So just trying to own our stories and identity itself is such a big task, and ensuring that we build leaders in the communities is a difficult process. For me, what really helped is the process that was held for young people to discover who they are, what they want to become. And in that journey, it's that process that helped young people to, identify the leadership. So as, we worked with young people, and there's so many generations, I think 20 years, and, I can vouch for 20 generations in the organization. And there's so many young people that we come across, and ours was the early batch in Dream a Dream. Is that what I felt is that, like once you ignite leadership in young people who come from difficult background, it's like a ripple effect. It happens, and then, that's the sustainable way of building leaders, and then you lose control. And as Vishal was sharing, because I witnessed the rugby program few weeks back, it was so difficult. I was trying to hold my thought and everything, like this is the impact that we have created. So it was very difficult. So what it really helped could be, Ranjit, there are so many other young people, including myself, is the personal connection that we had with facilitators. It is the, caring and compassionate adults way we felt, it's genuine that yes, they are there, they are committed to support young people. It's just that owning and co-facilitating learning with us is what helped one to discover the leadership in the community. And one thing that I have seen which worked really well, and taking Ranjit's case, is that bottom-up leadership has a lot of effect in community, talking at a local level, because people have seen the kind of journey that I have had in my own family and community, and they've also seen Ranjit. And today, to be able to see Ranjit at this level, and me being managing a program in the organization, so many people have mentioned that it's inspiring, like how did it happen. So there are a lot of people who look up to us, and also when we share our stories with young people who are coming, so that has a lot of effect on young people. When it comes to leaders, usually in schools and in media, we always look up to the people that we have never met. It's always about the famous people, right? It's the stories from there is what is being quoted. So what is like one powerful thing that I found in our conversation with young people is that we celebrate the leaders within our program, like within the community. So which gives hope to young people, saying that I think there is something, there is that potential, and that is what keeps pushing young people from one level to another level. And yeah, just what Vishal spoke about, Ranjit, or it could be in my case, and there are so many other young people. So that is the journey that we have had in the organization. So yeah, on the same note, thank you, Vishal, just for taking that pause. And I felt that, it was so important for me to share this. So as, we are continuing this conversation. So the third question that I have for you is, from your work at Dream a Dream, what are your deepest learnings about how we develop this type of leadership, and what conditions enable, Ranjit to happen, Pavitra to happen, or Pallavi to happen?
Yes, thank you, Pavitra. That's a very important question. And again, we've learned along the way from young people like you. Well, of course, I can't say Pavitra is a young person anymore. She's an associate director at the organization, and we are peers at a leadership level today in the organization. But Ranjit that you mentioned, Ranjit is the one who's held the rugby program together and ensured that today hundreds of girls in the community are playing rugby. And mind you, with no support from Dream a Dream. This is a completely community-run initiative, independently, voluntary run, with no organizational support from our end other than building capacities of young people like Ranjit. I think the first key lesson around how to develop this kind of leadership, of course, not just creating opportunities is not enough, right? Like Pavitra said, there is something that you do in the design of the relationship between an adult and a young person. What we realized very early on is young people have a need to be seen and heard, like all of us do. They have a valid need to be seen and heard. And when you create spaces for them to be seen and heard, truly seen and heard for who they are, is when they start believing themselves, start believing in their own agency. Young people who grow up in adversity come from messaging, which is usually that you're good for nothing, you're useless, you'll never do anything important in your life. I know Pavitra's grown up with those messages in her community, in her school. Ranjit has grown up with those messages. A young woman, Pallavi, who's a third generation leader today in the organization, grew up with those similar messages. It gets amplified if you're a girl. It gets amplified if you're from a minority community or a minority religion. It gets amplified if you're different in any way. And then when they find a space where they're seen for who they are, where their strengths are seen, where their strengths are celebrated, where they are taught to own their story. It does not matter what the story is. If the story is of abuse or neglect or emotional trauma or abandonment or being orphaned, whatever the story is, when you learn to own that story in relationship with one or more adults who have a healthy relationship, a relationship of respect, dignity, care, love, compassion, that is the game changer. And what we did was, in the core DNA of the organization, we imbibed these approaches of respect, care, dignity, and compassion. So today, anyone you meet at Dream a Dream, and when you just experience them in relationship to a young person, you will see this level of care, dignity, and respect being demonstrated. So we made that into an organizational DNA. We train teams in this about how do we unlock our innate sense of compassion, care, empathy, and how we then showcase that and demonstrate that in our relationship with young people across the board. So that was very critical. And an example of that is Pallavi, a young woman who came into our program. I remember Pallavi when she was 14 years old and she was part of her life skills program. And I went up to her and said hello and tried talking to her. She wouldn't speak a word. She wouldn't. She would look down. Her body language would be like always looking down, not making eye contact, extremely shy, extremely restless in her body. And then she went on to become a young leader, a facilitator. She traveled the world on different programs that she got opportunities for. When she came back, she decided to go back and facilitate in the community where she grew up in the school where she was a student. And very quickly realized that because of urban development in a city like Bangalore, the free spaces that were there, which were used as play spaces, had gone because of urban development. And children were increasingly not having play spaces. The play spaces for children were shrinking. So what she did is, as a young 22-year-old leader, over a period of 1 year, negotiated with local philanthropists, local politicians, local leaders, school leaders, parents, young people, brought them all together and pushed this idea that young people in their neighborhood needed a play space. Managed to get a local political leader to allocate a land, got a philanthropist to support the cleaning up of that land, which was a garbage dump, got volunteers, young people, her peers, to clean up the space, and created this beautiful play space for children in her community. And she invited me to the inauguration of this space. And the moment for me when I saw that she had become someone else and she had truly unlocked her sense of leadership is when they were inaugurating this space. There were 13 men on the dais, on the stage, giving speeches about how this was such an important piece in the community. And then there was Pallavi, one woman, who managed to get these 13 leaders from the community, all men, to change their view about young people. And today she's a force to reckon with in her community. For any challenges that happen in the community, people trust her, they reach out to her, they seek her help. And she's built a strong, trusting relationship with leaders in the community who trust her judgment, who trust her opinions. And she's created this space where at least 1,000 kids every week have access to that space. And that's what, when creating an environment to be truly seen and heard, does to a young person. The second piece, the second lesson that we learned was that it is great to invest in young people and unlocking the sense of agency and capacity, right? That's what we do. We're good at it. But when young people go out into the world, what happens? They hit barriers. They hit barriers of cultural norms, social norms, resistances, biases, prejudices. They hit barriers of they being told, you can't do this. Today, when a young woman from a slum in Bangalore, having built her life skills and capacities, goes out as a young adult into a job market, for an interview, and if the person interviewing her is, say, from an upper caste system, it is unlikely that this young woman, even with all her skills and talents, will get a job, because there are prejudices in society. If you add the intersectional lens of today, that young woman also being from a minority community, or from a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe in India, or from a different race in any other context, that adds an added dimension of resistance. Today, if a young woman has built her sense of identity and says, I want to go out and be an artist, and I want to travel the world to learn how to be an artist. If her parents would pull her back and say, girls from our household don't step out of their house. Your job is to finish education and we'll find you a groom to get married to, and that's going to be your life for the rest of your life. What use is of that agency? What use is the life skill? So the second piece of unlocking community level leadership was to also work with the stakeholders, work with parents, work with employers, work with policymakers, work with media on breaking some of these conventional notions of cultural norms or social norms that are holding young people back from truly thriving. To challenge some of these notions that are holding young people back, so that young people truly feel supported to thrive, right? It's not just now I've given you the life skills, now go figure out your life. But I'm also helping break the resistances around. So that's the second piece of the work that any organization, any movement like a people first community movement needs to do. Over to you, Pavitra.
Thank you, Vishal. So yeah, coming back to Ranjit and Pallavi's story, today the entire community looks up to them. And I keep telling Pallavi that, she should actually stand for election. She should contest. Even if it's not winning, it's so important. The kind of identity that they have built in the community. It's our own school principal who looks up to them. And there's so many people who keep reaching out to them for the support. So when we witness that, and that's when we feel like, this is how you come out of the community and say we are done with our work. So because right now it's a culture in the community, and there is that support system. So that's what Ranjit and Pallavi have done. So Vishal, as you were sharing this reflection, the fourth question that I have for you is, as you reflect on your own leadership journey over the years in Dream a Dream, what is the biggest lesson you have learned?
Again, so many lessons. But the one I want to talk into is that at the core of it, this work of giving power back to communities, giving power back to young people, and truly making them equal partners in this journey requires work on myself, requires work on us. I can't say I didn't come into this work without my own lenses or limiting beliefs or prejudices and biases. I had my own limiting beliefs. I had my own prejudices and biases that I came into this work with. I did come into this work thinking that I will create the change, that I will be the driver of this change. And I was honored and lucky enough to very quickly realize that there's no I in this journey. There is just the we. So the biggest piece of the work in the last 20 years has been to constantly become self-aware of my own prejudices and biases, identify them when they are playing out. To give you an example, in the first 10 years of the organization, I had never built or run an organization before. As I said, I started Dream a Dream when I was 21. So I didn't know how to build an organization. I didn't know how to build a team. So I did it the way I thought the world does it. And what ended up happening is I built an organization that was deeply patriarchal, that had this very alpha male image. It had my leadership stamp all over it. And my leadership stamp was sort of micromanaging, distrusting, of expecting everyone to work 7 days a week, 24/7, because we were trying to change lives, and that was more important than our own personal lives. It was always about pushing the team towards a vision that only I had an inkling of, and very quickly realizing that the more I did that, the more I was alienating from the work itself. If we want to unlock agency, a sense of identity, ownership, joy in young people, we cannot authentically do that if the team inside the organization does not feel that sense of agency, authenticity, joy, engagement in their work, in their role. And it took me 8 to 9 years to realize that. And since then, of course, Dream and Dream has completely fundamentally shifted its practices, which is definitely a conversation for another time. But at the core of the idea is this, that if we want to truly build a people-first approach in organization building, then the work has to first start with ourselves, and it will always be the work first on ourselves. Always becoming aware of our own prejudices and biases, always becoming aware of my identities as a cis-het man coming from an upper caste Indian family, and how that identity makes me invisible to some other voices. How that identity brings a certain power equation in every relationship that I enter into within the organization, with young people, with communities. And constantly aware of how I'm breaking out of that. I'm letting go of that. Right? It took me a long time to truly accept that the best way to create change was to give power back to the communities, and then to also accept that the change that the communities want might look fundamentally different from what I thought they should be doing. If I go into a community and say, this is what you need, and then when I give power, or actually I can't even give power, right? Even that language is filled with so much prejudice and bias from my end right now, right? So I still have to work on that. But when the power goes back to the community and they choose to transform something, like if Pallavi says, I don't want education, but I want a play space for kids in my community, I have to learn to respect that choice. I have to truly learn to accept that choice, respect it, celebrate it, support it. I have to be in a place where Pallavi becomes the leader and I become the follower. And that journey is the most difficult journey for individuals and organizations and societies to make, to truly believe in the wisdom of the communities that they're working with, and believe that those communities have the wisdom, have the agency, have the capacities to transform their lives. And what they need along the way is supporters, is champions, is people who celebrate with them, people who build their capacities when needed, only when they ask for it, and people who step back and stay invisible and allowing them to shine, like Pallavi has shined, like you have shined, Pavitra, like Ranjit is shining today. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. That's what I mentioned about the process. I think it's that process that helps one to discover leadership and own themselves. The journey for me was also not easy. We had 3 sisters. I'm the middle one. I had the elder and younger one. So my parents always, wanted boy in the family because everybody had boy, and that had huge impact on my father, who turned alcoholic. And it's my mother who worked really hard to ensure that we had basics of education. And I came in contact with Dream and Dream when I was 15 years old, when there was huge fight that took place at home, and my mother had health issues, and there was literally no one, because we didn't have good reputation in the family. And the way the family also used to identify us is not as, by my parents' name, but usually because my father used to drink, and for any function that they used to invite, there's always this fight that used to happen. So people, had labeled us saying that it's that alcoholic person's daughter, which had huge impact on learning. And that is when I came in contact with Dream a Dream. And since then, every single day, it's been a transformation day. I felt each and every staff who worked in Dream a Dream, because at that time I was 15 and 16. So there were so many staff who was older to me. The kind of space that they held is what really helped shape who I am. And that is something that's being translated. And I feel it's so important to focus on our being, because you can't change that. While Pallavi can be a different leader, Ranjit can be a different leader, and I can be the different leader what is very difficult to, to not change is the being. And that is what we focus. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me. And my journey was not easy being a girl. So many challenges because I went into an evening college. And every single day there was a lot of obstacles. There were so many times that I felt that I should just give up on my life. So it's just that resilience, which helped me hold myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vishal and Pavitra, for sharing just so openly and honestly. And what I'm struck by both of your sharing is just, in some ways, the simplicity of what you're sharing. It comes down to dignity. It comes down to having everyone feel seen and heard. It comes down to believing that every single person has value and worth. But what I think is remarkable of what you've done is, just in how you both modeled it today, constantly doing the work to make this come alive on a day-to-day basis. So thank you both for just sharing so beautifully. What I'd love to do, and maybe I'll just give everyone a minute to digest everything that you've taken away. And in the chat, if you could just share your questions, because I think there's so much wisdom here and I'd love to hear as many questions as possible. So I'll give everyone a minute. And please in the chat, just share your questions and let's get to as many of them as possible. And while they're coming, maybe I'll open it up with one. And this is to both of you, but maybe I'll start with you, Vishal. Vishal, you shared about, in this last bit around how you ended up having to do this self-work, but it took many years to do this journey. How do you then support others to go on that journey, maybe to confront the biases, the prejudices? What work do you do to support others around you now that you've had some of these realizations to do that self-work themselves? How do you do that within your organization, within communities? Can you just share a little bit more practically what that looks like?
Sure. Well, one is around organization design itself, how we have now designed organization culture. So, like a lot of organizations have people development practices. Our people development practices are completely focused on self-reflection. So creating spaces, again, using our pedagogical approaches of art and play. So we use art and play in everything that we do with young people, with our teams, with teachers, with school leaders, influencers. But facilitated environments which help us go into our own stories, help us learn to unpack our stories from different lenses, from lenses of gender, patriarchy, from lenses of caste, class, race, skin color, sexual orientation. But what's important then is when you unpack this, and sometimes these spaces can release a lot of trauma, how do you hold space for it then? So all of us in the organization today practice what we call facilitative leadership, which is really around holding spaces for people to go through their own journeys, holding spaces for people to unpack their stories, unpack their own biases and limiting beliefs, and without judgment, to do that without judgment. Today, the team, if you see 40% of the team are young people who are alumni from the program today. And then the rest come from very different backgrounds, some from very, very privileged backgrounds. Right? But you don't want to create a space where even people who come from privilege feel that they're being judged for having born in privilege or having grown up in privilege. But how do you hold space for, okay, what does privilege mean to me in my identity today? And how is my privilege showing up? And how do I invest in unpacking my privilege? And that's exactly the work we do with young people. That's exactly the work we do with all our other stakeholders. So it's a pedagogical approach that we've developed. We call it the Arc of Transformation Framework. We've worked with child psychologists, clinical psychologists, people who have been involved with creative learning spaces over the last 10, 12 years to build this. It's something that we're very, very proud of. And then translated that into actual systems and processes inside the organizations. So today our people practices inside the organization, our people policies inside the organizations reflect this investment in self-awareness, in shifting and transforming from who we are and growing together as a group, as a community. So that's a big piece of the work that we do.
Thank you for sharing that. And it just sounds like it's such a comprehensive approach for thinking about this, both in terms of how you hold space to also your processes in the organization. Let me open it up for questions. Wendy, I'm going to turn it over to you to bring voice to your questions. And then again, invite everybody else. We might have time for one or two more. So please put your questions in the chat or thoughts or reactions if you want to come off mute and share. But Wendy, let me open it up to you for your question.
Vishal, I thought it was, so powerful and important when you described, coming to a point of realizing that, others in the communities would have potentially different visions for change than you yourself had, and that was kind of fine and good. And that in fact, unlocking collective leadership is so much about that mindset shift. And I'm just wondering, and I know it's kind of hard to remember these things, but I'm wondering if you can remember any of the forces that helped you make that mindset shift, because it feels like such an important mindset shift for all of us, as we're working to develop collective leadership.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if I just go back to the rugby story, for example, the first time that video was shown to us, it was like a big blow for me to realize that I actually didn't know the transformative impact this program was having in the lives of these kids in their homes and communities. And it took a bunch of young people to come together and use the agency that we had invested in to tell us that our decision was wrong, that our decision to close the program was wrong, and that they needed to be part of the decision-making process. They were not just receivers of the program, they were now decision makers in the program, and their voice needed to be heard. So that was the first time. Or in Pallavi's case, when she was investing in building this play spaces, we had been working in that community for over a decade with multiple schools in that community. And it never occurred to us that the play spaces in that community were shrinking. It never occurs to us that what was important for these kids to have in an increasingly urban, concrete environment that the neighborhood was becoming, for kids to have space, not just to play, but also to feel safe. What Pallavi knew and realized living in that community very quickly is that when kids didn't have play spaces, they were on the streets. And they were on the streets, they became vulnerable to gangs. They became vulnerable to alcohol abuse. They became vulnerable to substance abuse. They were getting taken into gangs. They were getting into fights, which we would have never realized because we never lived in the community. It was not our lived experience. Right? It took a Pallavi to help us realize that just creating a play space for kids also meant that we are keeping kids safe, that we're creating an alternative for them, which was much more healthier than just running an after-school program for 2 hours a week. So there were many moments like this, or even in Pavitra's case, when Pavitra took on very early on, we used to run something called Dream Fun Days, which are these weekend fun activities that we used to take kids out on for them to go out and explore the city. And I remember this one year, Pavitra did about 52 or 54 of these, which is more than one every weekend, for like thousands of kids, taking them out to public spaces, museums, to play parks, kite flying festivals, to art exhibitions. And we thought this is just a fun activity for the kids. But when we went back into one of these communities, which was a predominantly minority community that we used to work with, we very quickly realized that children from those communities actually had never stepped out of their neighborhood, ever. Their life revolved around the neighborhood. And it took a Pavitra to realize that if these young people need to build life skills and learn to thrive in the world as adults, they needed an exposure to the world outside this neighborhood. So then she created those spaces for them. But it wasn't easy because the community resisted, parents resisted, school resisted. So Pavitra then had to work with that school over a period of time, over multiple years. Pavitra and many facilitators had to work to build trust in that community to trust us. And then when we opened up the world for these young people and we started looking at our impact results over the next 3 years, we were shocked with how much these kids were thriving. So more and more we realized that why are we holding on to this leadership when we can actually distribute this leadership across the team, distribute this leadership to young people, distribute this leadership to our facilitators, to our parents, to teachers in the community, who can give us insights that we will never have access to sitting within the four walls of our office. And if we can just create spaces of listening, we can create spaces of they feeling that their voice is important, will be heard, and they're part of the decision-making process. So those experiences, they really shifted us. And we were like, it seems pretty obvious for us to do this now.
Thank you, Vishal. And what I'm struck by hearing you is it's not just bringing in voices from the community, but it's really listening. And what I heard from both you and Pavitra saying is, and that might mean willingness to let go of control, but in the spirit of recognizing that there's much more power in this distributed leadership or collective leadership. You can hear ideas that are going to make things much stronger. But yeah, I really acknowledge your just ability to listen as well, because that takes something. Let me open it up to, we have a question here from Hannah that gets to a little bit of what you talked about. So oftentimes there's resistance from different stakeholders. Hannah, can you just give voice to your question in the chat?
Sure, Radha, thank you so much. And Vishal and Prapta, thank you so much. What an inspiring and wonderful conversation. My question was, I was really struck as you were discussing in leadership development programs, how we often spend enormous effort really building the potential of the individual to both realize and fully embrace that potential, and that's so powerful and amazing. But I was really struck by what you're talking about is then they go into the world and they hit these immediate barriers, and how important it is that we look at both of those pieces, both building those individuals and what it takes for them to really be able to work in the system. And so I'd love to hear maybe, and it sounds like you spoke a little bit to it about the community engagement, but what you've done or how you've seen success in really breaking down some of those barriers, and particularly when a lot of times it's hard with stakeholders or donors or such to invest or to see the potential of something like breaking down those barriers, which can be long-term, it can be fluid, it can be not results-oriented, and just would love to hear some of the successes or the ways you've approached that.
It's a great question, Anna. I don't think we're still seeing successes yet. Especially in breaking cultural norms, social norms, limiting beliefs in communities, it's terribly hard. And I can tell you, and Pavitra can speak more into it. Even today, Pavitra, as a leader in the organization, in the community, struggles in some of the ways that she's bringing up her own child with the kind of resistance that she receives from her family and the extended community. Even today, through the pandemic, we lost young people to suicide because of the same limiting beliefs that communities have. Young people have lost jobs through the pandemic now, without any sense of how do they rebuild their careers, and what are the capacities to rebuild their careers, find jobs where they can continue to grow and thrive in. It's a tough one. We are yet to see, I would say, any significant successes of that. But that's the work. That is the work we need to do. And it will take a few more years before we see examples of this. So what we're hoping is the kind of world that now the likes of Pavitra, Pallavi, Ranjit inherit as adults, and the way they hold space for other young people is what's going to create the shift, right? So we need an entire generation of very different adults with very different belief systems, with coming in with deep values of care, compassion, dignity, respect, and love, who will then unlock the potential of young people. But otherwise, we're continuing to see tremendous barriers, through parents, through communities, through even education systems. I mean, in a country like India today, with high levels of polarization that's happening, very, very difficult for us to continue to push for messages and narratives of love and compassion and respect and dignity. So I'm sorry, I wish I could give you a more hopeful answer, but the hope really is that that is the work. And just because we don't see the results doesn't mean that work is not important and shouldn't be done. The results will come, but it'll be a generational shift. I mean, the way Pavitra is now bringing up her child is so empowering to see. And I know the world that Pavitra's child is inheriting today is much more hopeful and joyful and filled with love than what Pavitra had to go through.
Thank you, Vishal. I'm realizing we, as always, have more questions than we can get to, but maybe what I'll do is just give each of you a chance to just give one closing comment. So, and maybe Pavitra, I'll start with you. Just what gives you hope? So of everything you shared, what leaves you with hope, or what makes you hopeful? And then Vishal, same question for you, and then we'll wrap up here. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but hopefully the next time around.
What gives me hopeful is that, the world has caring and compassionate adults. And I'm actually looking up to this entire group that is here today. I think we're all here because of the purpose. So the hope is that there are many people who are joining to support young people. So that's what gives me hope, that the world has nice people.
Thank you, Pavitra.
I can just say ditto.
I'm sorry, Vishal, could you say that again?
So I would say exactly the same thing as Pavitra. I think what continues to give us a sense of purpose and meaning is that there is this movement that's emerging, right? And it's such a strong, big movement. And my work today is a lot more global, and I see that across the world there is a counteract with love that's coming in. That we're feeling this deep sense of connection with each other, that we're feeling this deep sense that we need to bring more love into the world. We need to bring more, just respect each other for who we are and break out of these very superficial differences that are keeping us apart. So I think there is a movement, and this movement of now building equal partnerships, collective leadership, the movement what People First is trying to do, really shift this narrative that we are all equal partners in this journey. And we all have wisdom, we all have lived experiences, we all have listening, we can all learn together and find solutions to these complex challenges together. And we are committed to doing it. So there are nice people in the world, and we are talking to each other a lot more now.
Well, thank you so much, Vishal and Pavitra, for a beautiful conversation and just for modeling some of these values that you espouse in the world, even in the conversation between the two of you and sharing so openly with us. And thank you all for joining. We have our next talk coming up in July with Jacqueline Novogratz, who's the founder of Acumen, and she'll be in conversation with Kasaga, who is the CEO of Teach for Uganda and is also an Acumen Fellow. So very much looking forward to that conversation, and I think we'll continue to build on some of the richness that we got here. So thank you all for joining us, and look out for a note about that next talk coming up soon.